Have you ever wondered how a single small motion, a quiet decision, could shake an entire realm? People often believe that to change destiny, there must be thunderous roars, raging storms, or fierce confrontations. But the truth is, sometimes silence is the loudest thunder. Sometimes an invisible move becomes the fire that burns away centuries of captivity. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath and imagine this. You are sitting in an old room. The four walls around you are covered with memories you never chose, but were forced to inherit. Generational pain, repeating patterns, cycles your ancestors once drowned in. Outside the window is a world playing the same sad tune over and over. And you've lived in that melody for so long, it has become your familiar breath. Then one moment arrives, quiet and almost unnoticed. You stand up. You don't smash the door. You don't scream in protest. You simply turn the lock gently and step outside. In that moment, the house collapses. The music stops. Chains that lasted for 100 years fall apart in silence. Psalm 25-14 says, "The Lord confides in those who fear him. He makes his covenant known to them." You may not realize it, but it is your reverence, your honest longing for freedom, that opened this door. This was not an accidental choice. It was your response to the revelation God planted deep within your soul long ago. People will ask, how can an invisible move break chains that have lasted for generations? Picture a chessboard. Your opponent thinks they're playing a game with you. They study your every move, every response. But in silence, you don't move any piece at all. You unplug the entire board. The lights go out, the game ends. And as they look around in confusion, the board has vanished. Chosen one. That is what you have done. You didn't just resist. You didn't just fight. You made an invisible move, a step no one saw coming, no one heard, yet its echo shook the realm of the spirit. The enemy didn't even hear the door close. When they turned back, the building had crumbled, and you were gone, far beyond their reach. There is a secret in the spiritual world that few speak of. Transformation doesn't always begin with noise. It begins within, with the moment you say enough to yourself. When your inner world changes, the landscape of your soul changes, and the world around you can no longer remain the same. People think cycles are broken by force, but no, cycles break when you refuse to keep watching the same old play. Remember this, in every cell of your being, you carry a covenant, a hidden promise not everyone can hear. And when the time is right, that promise calls you to leave the board. That is the moment you become the divine anomaly, the unexpected move that no script could ever predict. They will say you changed, but the truth is, you didn't just change. You disappeared from the old map. You shifted to a new frequency, where the old traps no longer work. Those who once knew exactly how to manipulate you are now confused. They push the old buttons, pull the same levers, but nothing happens. They think you're still sitting in front of them, but it's only a shadow. Your soul left long ago. Let me give you a picture. Imagine a dark room where your family has lived for generations. Each year, they pass down a single candle to light the way. The candle burns, sending smoke into the air, leaving black stains on the walls. The room grows darker even as the candle burns. Then one day, you find the light switch. You flip it. The room floods with light. The candle becomes meaningless. And from that moment on, no one wants to return to the dark. Chosen one, you are the one who flipped that switch. You may not realize it, but that moment was not just for you. It was for every generation that comes after. When an old blueprint is erased, it can no longer be passed down. When a door is sealed shut, no one after you can accidentally walk through it again. You didn't just step out. You sealed the entrance, so freedom could become the new legacy. This is why you are called the Chosen One. Not because you are perfect, not because you are stronger than anyone else, but because within you lies the courage to do what those before you could not, to pause, stay silent, and turn the key. A small action, but a spiritual earthquake. And now, you stand before another gate, a gate that leads to a journey no one else can walk for you. A journey where there is no room for old patterns, inherited burdens, or invisible chains. You are entering a new land, where freedom is the air you breathe, and peace is the language spoken. But before you go any further, hold this promise deep in your heart. Psalm 25-14. The Lord confides in those who fear him. He makes his covenant known to them. You are not walking alone. That covenant has gone before you. It has opened the way and will guard you to the very end. So, chosen one, when you look back at the moment you turned the key and stepped out of that old room, remember, it was not just an action. It was a declaration that you are ready to live as a testimony of freedom. A living proof that an invisible move can change everything. And this is only the beginning. There are things not easily seen with the naked eye. We often think a cycle has ended when its outer signs disappear, when events stop repeating. But the truth is much harsher. As long as the blueprint still exists, the house can always be rebuilt, again and again. Picture this. An old sketch lies in a drawer. The house may have collapsed, but the drawing remains untouched. Someone will eventually pull it out, lay the bricks along the same old lines, and the house of darkness will rise once more. But you did something different. You didn't just tear down the wall. You burned the entire blueprint. You faced what few dare to confront. You walked into the very root, where the invisible lines of patterns are etched deep within the soul, and you erased them. You didn't just break the cycle, you removed its frame, so it could no longer hold on to anything. Maybe you've already felt the shift. Those who once knew how to drag you back into the spiral, they've tried again. They still use the same words, the same games, the same emotional triggers that once melted your strength, stirred your anger, or led you astray. But now, everything slides past you, like pebbles falling onto a still lake. No waves, no reaction. They are confused, even angry, because the familiar button no longer connects to anything. In the past, there was an invisible handshake between you and the pattern, a subconscious agreement, a spiritual contract unseen by the world. That handshake kept pulling you back into the same stories, the same scripts, the same pain. But now, that hand is no longer extended, and yours no longer reaches out. The contract is torn, the door is sealed, the connection is cut. This isn't just surface-level change. It required sacrifice. Because to cut something from the root, you had to let parts of yourself, parts that had learned to live in darkness, fade away. Aspects of your old self had to die. And yes, it was a painful death. Letting go of the familiar ego, even when it is wounded, is never easy. But only when it falls away can you become someone the old cycle cannot inhabit. Imagine a room once filled with the smell of mold. You clean it, wipe it down, replace the furniture, but the smell remains. It is soaked into the walls, the floor, the air itself. To make it truly disappear, you must remove each brick, replace each board, until the room becomes something entirely new. That is what you have done with your soul. And because of that, the old room can never be tainted again. That makes you different. The chains that once bound others in your family, in your community, in your generation, they no longer have the right to touch you. Not because you are stronger, but because the foundation those chains latched onto is no longer there. Chains fall, not because you pulled harder, but because there is nothing left for them to hold. Some will look at you and say, "You've changed," but the truth runs deeper. You haven't just changed. You've become someone entirely new, a being made of something that no longer matches the old pattern. You have transformed so thoroughly that the cycle has no place to land. And because of that, it cannot rise again. It cannot rebuild. It cannot return. Few speak of the weariness that comes with this journey. It is not glamorous. It is not filled with fireworks, like the victory stories often told. It is quiet, lonely. It demands that you walk into the deepest shadows of yourself, where ancestral wounds still bleed, where invisible contracts still cling, where ghosts still whisper your name. But you went in. You looked them in the eye, and instead of making peace, you chose to end the agreement. And as the old parts of you dissolved, a sense of peace rushed in. What once tempted you now holds no power. What once stirred your restlessness now feels hollow. What once made you yearn now seems like a fading illusion. Like a machine unplugged, all buttons lose meaning. No signal, no reaction, only silence. But this silence is victory. From here, the spiritual landscape around you begins to shift. You walk in a freedom no one before you could reach. You carry a new atmosphere, one where light lives in place of shadow. And this is not just a blessing for you. It is a legacy for those who come after. Because when the old blueprint is erased, no generation after you can use it to rebuild captivity. You didn't just break the cycle, you erased its seed. And that is why you have become what darkness fears most, a person around whom no chains can be rebuilt, In silence, you shook the heavens. And that silence now speaks the loudest truth. The cycle is dead. There are battles that feel never-ending. Not because the enemy is strong, but because you keep fighting on the same old ground. Every time the cycle appears, you throw yourself into it with all your might, resisting, reacting, struggling. And so, the loop continues. It's not that you lack strength. It's that the battlefield was never yours to begin with. It belongs to the darkness, a territory designed to make you lose. But you saw through this, chosen one. You did what few dare to do. You stepped off the familiar battlefield. You refused to remain in the old swamp, where insult led to anger, where hurt led to revenge, where fear led to retreat. You walked away, not to run, but to elevate the entire war to a level the enemy can't reach. Imagine a kite. When it lies on the ground, anyone can trample it or tear it apart. But when it soars high, lifted by the wind, every hand that once tried to hold it down becomes useless. You are that kite. You chose to rise above the familiar emotional storms and reach the sky where freedom lives. The enemy still tries. They still shoot their arrows, but those arrows have no address. They send letters to a house that no longer exists. They call a number that's been disconnected. All of it becomes echoes lost in a void. And it is that very emptiness that unsettles them more than anything. Psalm 91:7 declares, 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. This is more than comfort. It is a promise for those who step off human battlefields and enter the territory of God. When you rise, when you no longer respond to old attacks, you're not just escaping. You've entered a realm where darkness holds no map. The beautiful truth is, this is not avoidance. You are not avoiding the fight. You have changed the rules of the game. You no longer stand in the mud circle struggling to win. You rise to a higher place, to fight with light, with silence, with the awareness that you are no longer bound. In doing so, you don't just protect yourself. You confuse the enemy. They thrive in chaos, but chaos is no longer your home. Maybe you felt this already. Someone who once knew how to trigger your anger now finds you silent. Someone who waited for your collapse now watches you walk forward in peace. They don't understand, because you've stopped subscribing to those battles. You've changed your frequency, your address, your environment. And now, when they look for you in the familiar storm, all they find is emptiness. None of this happened by chance. It came from choice. You chose to control your gaze, your heart, your reactions. You chose to fix your attention on peace instead of conflict. And when you changed your focus, your entire inner world transformed. Where light shines, darkness must retreat. There is power in the refusal to engage. The enemy wants your reaction, wants your words, wants you to lose your peace. But when you deny them that, you've disarmed an entire arsenal. You've forced them to fight themselves because you're no longer responding. And in that silence, your true power is revealed. Chosen one, now is the time to understand. This battle is not yours to fight alone. You only need to stand in the light. The rest, God will handle. He lifts you above the lands where the enemy can walk. He places you on a frequency where their schemes cannot survive. And if you are hearing these words, it means you've already begun to feel the shift. You know you no longer belong to the cycles of meaningless arguments and exhausting battles. Your soul longs for a new atmosphere, one of peace, freedom, and light. So I invite you, right now, if these words have stirred something in your heart, let this journey ripple outwards. Click like, share this with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, so that with every step forward, you walk with light beside you. Because this journey is not meant to be walked alone. We are building a community of those who dared to leave the old battlefield and step into a new sky. And I believe you are one of them. When you choose to rise, you don't just win for yourself. You become a mirror. You leave a path. You open a door so others can see that they too can do what you did. They too can leave the old chessboard and ascend to a place where harm cannot touch them. And from this moment forward, everything will be different. You will no longer be prey in the old war. You will be the one who leads, who walks with vision and steady peace. Because when you move the battlefield higher, darkness has nothing left to hold on to. It can only look up, powerless, as you continue to walk into the light. There is a truth few want to admit. Most spiritual cycles and generational patterns survive because they are predictable. They know how people tend to react. When you're insulted, you get angry. When abandoned, you seek acceptance. When tested, you give up. It is this repetition that fuels the chains passed down through generations. But then, one day, something unexpected happens. You, the chosen one, refused to follow the script. You didn't walk the same path. You became the variable. And that one variable, even if it appears only once, is enough to collapse the entire equation. Imagine a play that's been performed for decades. Every actor knows their lines, their movements, their expressions by heart. Even the audience can predict the drama and the tears at each scene. But suddenly, one actor walks onto the stage, smiles where they were meant to cry, stays silent where they were meant to scream, and walks away when a confrontation was expected. The entire play unravels. No one knows how to continue. The script falls apart because one person refused to follow the old rhythm. That person is you. In the moment when the cycle expected you to rage, you chose calm. Where it expected you to quit, you continued. Where it thought you'd beg for validation, you stood up and walked away. Your silence spoke louder than any protest. And that difference made the cycle incapable of adapting. Because the power of the cycle lies in repetition, not in creativity. It doesn't know how to handle change. It only knows how to copy, to replay, to reuse the same formula. And when you break that formula, it panics. It crumbles. It dissolves. This didn't come from an easy road. It wasn't luck. Life didn't suddenly become easy. In fact, it happened in your hardest moments, when pressure seemed unbearable. But right there, in the fire, you saw the truth. Every situation was just a clever trap, a script written to lead you to the same old ending. And for the first time you chose to rewrite that ending. You began to see every trick as it started. You saw the wires before they pulled you into another climax. And instead of being swept away, you paused. You untangled the links, broke the loops, dismantled the joints. Every small decision made differently became a blow against chains that had lasted for centuries. When you become aware, the cycle loses its power. It feeds on unconsciousness, on automatic reactions. But when you awaken, when you see the entire board, you are no longer a piece. You become the player. And from that moment on, the power shifts back into your hands. Chosen one, remember this. You didn't just break the cycle for yourself. When one person becomes a variable, the whole system trembles. What people once called fate or a generational curse is revealed for what it really is, a cheap script. You proved that nothing is unbreakable. You are living proof that chains can be shattered, circles can be broken, and old roads can be left behind. And when that proof exists, others can no longer pretend they don't know. They may still choose to follow the cycle, but they cannot say it was destiny. Because you showed them that with one different choice, the entire system collapses. Picture a row of dominoes, thousands of pieces lined up, ready to fall in sequence. That's what the cycle island. It relies on predictability. One piece falls, so the next must fall. But you, chosen one, you stood firm. You refused to fall. And because you didn't fall, the whole chain stopped. That refusal is your loudest declaration. It says, "No, I am no longer a piece in this game. I am the one writing a new one." And in that declaration, the power of the cycle goes silent. People may look at you and not understand. They see your calm where there should be chaos. They see your smile where there should be tears. They see you walking away where you were expected to stay. They don't understand, but you do. You know that in choosing differently, you became the variable, the one the darkness could never prepare for. You are the break in the equation, the wrong note in the old symphony, the shifting wind in a familiar dance. And with just one variable, the entire system becomes unsustainable. And from now on, you walk as one who has stepped out of the script. You no longer act out a role someone else wrote. You are the author now, a new story, a new ending, one founded on freedom. Chosen one, you didn't just break the cycle. You became what the cycle fears most. The unexpected, the unpredictable, the untouchable freedom no prison can contain. And that is why you are no longer bound, no longer called back, no longer trapped in a decaying equation. You have become the variable. And once the variable appears, the old script is gone forever. There are families that carry memories deeper than flesh and blood, invisible cracks that run through generations. These are not just personal stories. They are collective scripts, passed down from parent to child, grandparent to grandchild. And within these scripts lie emotional landmines, certain words, situations, or familiar events that, when triggered, cause the whole family to erupt. You may have seen it before. A single careless comment, a recycled blame, a predictable event in the year. Suddenly, the atmosphere changes. Anger flares. Tears fall. Words, sharp as blades, are thrown without restraint. People walk away, then return, only to repeat the same drama as if there's no other way. These hidden minds have operated flawlessly for generations, holding entire bloodlines in a loop of conflict and pain. But then, someone steps into that circle and chooses differently. The chosen one. You didn't make grand declarations. You didn't stand up and scream that you were ending the legacy of pain. You simply stayed silent. When the mine went off, you no longer reacted. When the old buttons were pushed, you no longer got triggered. When accusations were thrown, you no longer felt the need to defend yourself. At first, it confused everyone. They were used to the old script. Press the button, you explode. Say this line, you cry. Bring up that moment, you fall apart. But this time, they pressed, and nothing happened. That emptiness made them uneasy. They pulled the lever again, still no response. That's when they realized the mine had been disarmed. People often think silence means suppression. But your silence was not repression. It was transformation. Because if the wound inside still existed, the slightest touch would still cause you to react. But you healed. You allowed the wound to be cleaned, the memory to lose its power. You changed from within, until nothing inside you matched the pattern of those emotional explosives anymore. Psalm 34-18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." It was through your brokenness that you made space for God to enter, and He came to heal, to pull the shattered pieces from your heart. Because of that, when the old minds are triggered, all that remains in you is peace, and that peace is the one thing this cycle cannot survive. Perhaps you've already felt this stage. At first, your silence frustrated others. They were used to explosions. They needed drama to keep the script going. Without a reaction, they felt abandoned in an unfinished play. But slowly, they began to realize, without reaction, there is no script. Without the script, there is no cycle. The loop that spun through generations has now come to a sudden halt. Do you understand the weight of that? When one person in a lineage refuses to participate, the entire system begins to crack. Emotional weapons lose their power. The generational line loses its transmission. The landmines that were programmed to detonate for generations are now permanently disarmed. Imagine a field. Beneath its surface are hundreds of hidden mines planted long ago. Everyone walks across it with caution, knowing something could explode at any moment. But one day, someone patiently diffuses them, one by one, until the entire field is safe. That person made it possible for future generations to walk that land without fear. That person is you. This is more than a personal act. It is a legacy. You stopped a war that your descendants would have inherited. You transformed your family's inheritance from a minefield of emotion into a field of peace. Chosen one, what you have done is quiet, but powerful. No one needs to see you diffuse the mines. They only need to walk after you and hear no explosions. And over time, they will learn to walk like you, calmly, quietly, no longer controlled by blame or old memories. There may be resistance. Some may try to rewrite the script. They may attempt to lay new traps. But when you have changed at the root, when there is no longer a place inside you for explosives to latch onto, every attempt fails. Because a mine only explodes when there is something to ignite, and you have become safe ground. And that is a miracle. Not a miracle of lightning or thunder, but a miracle of silence. A miracle that not everyone notices at first, but as they walk with you, they will feel it. The ground has changed. No more shaking, no more threats. Only peace stretched wide beneath their feet. Chosen one, remember this. You didn't just heal yourself. You changed your family line. You did what generations before never dared. You cut the wires, and from now on, those emotional landmines are nothing but harmless relics, lying dormant, powerless. And in that sacred silence, you gave a gift beyond measure. The gift of a future without explosions, without blood, without tears. The gift of a field where freedom takes root. There are moments when you think you've finally escaped the spiral, only to feel a strange pull dragging you back. It doesn't feel like a mere habit, nor just a moment of weakness. It feels like a calling, invisible, yet echoing deep within your soul, inviting you to return to the place you've worked so hard to leave behind. People often call it temptation, sudden urges, coincidences that make you meet the same person, the same situation, the same memory. But the truth is, it's not random at all. These are the voices of invisible contracts, unbroken agreements, unhealed wounds. And as long as the contract remains, as long as the wound is open, the call will echo, pulling you back to where it all began. You've heard it clearly before, a sudden longing for something you know will destroy you, a trembling heart before a door you know leads to a prison. That is the call of the cycle, a ringing not from a phone, but from within. And for generations, everyone in your family has answered that call. They picked up, they followed, they fell back. But you, chosen one, did the unthinkable. You didn't just ignore the call. You changed the frequency. You silenced the ring. You erased the number. You made it so the call could no longer reach your soul. Picture an automated call list running year after year, always dialing at the same time. For generations, your family picked up. But now the phone rings and no one answers. The system is confused. It keeps calling, keeps repeating, but there is no response. And that silence is the sign that the cycle has lost its grip. This didn't happen by willpower alone. Willpower may hold for a while, but it still hears the call. It still trembles. It still wants to respond. Only inner transformation, only deep healing can turn that call into an empty echo. And that's exactly what you did. You canceled the invisible contracts. You allowed the wounds to heal. You cut the wires that gave that voice access to your soul. Now, when the call comes, there is no reaction within you, no tremble, no curiosity, no craving. You remain still, as if the call belongs to another world. It exists, but not for you. It calls, but it can no longer reach you. Let me give you a picture. Imagine someone living in a village where a bell is rung every time people are summoned. Everyone is so conditioned that at the sound of the bell, they rush out without thinking. But one day, that person moves to another home, farther away, up on a quiet hill. When the bell rings, they don't hear it anymore. The bell still sounds, the village still stirs, but in the house on the hill, there is only silence. That person has stepped out of the old rhythm. That person is you. You have moved to higher ground. Chosen one, understand that this freedom is not accidental. You didn't simply stop hearing. You changed your frequency. You chose peace over chaos, light over shadow, truth over illusion. Each of those choices lifted you higher, beyond the reach of that old signal. Don't be surprised if from time to time you still faintly hear a whisper of it. That's because the system is still operating, still sending signals. But when you've shifted out of range, those signals become nothing more than echoes that can no longer touch you. And one day, you'll notice you don't even hear them anymore. This silence, this stillness, is your victory. It is proof that you didn't just escape. You closed the door behind you so nothing could pull you back. It is also your legacy, because when you stepped out of range, your children and their children no longer grew up programmed to answer that call. Chosen one, let this truth sink deep. That voice will still echo, but it will never reach you again. You have changed your number. You have canceled the contract. You now walk under a sky where only the calls of heaven can find you. And as you walk in that light, you will know. Nothing can bring you back. Nothing can return you to a land already fallen. From here on, you are free, truly free. Not all cycles are meant to last forever. They are not immortal. They are not all-powerful. They are like dark seeds planted long ago, needing soil, water, and the agreement of a generation to continue growing. Every curse has an expiration date. It lives only as long as someone keeps nodding to it, keeps reacting the same way, keeps feeding it the energy it needs to survive. And when it passes through enough generations, people start believing it is eternal, unbreakable. But that's only an illusion. You have proven otherwise. You have become a challenger of time itself. You arrived at the very threshold where the curse expected you to fall, and you didn't. You crossed the line where many in your bloodline once stopped, and you kept going. And that alone exposed the cycle. It no longer had anyone to renew the contract. It was left behind, suspended in nothingness, like the shadow of a clock stuck still. Because the hands no longer move. Think back. In your family, there have been certain ages, seasons, and stages of life that always came with collapse. Someone broke at 30, under the weight of despair. Another unraveled at 40, under the pull of destructive habits. Someone else lost their way at 50, repeating the mistakes of the generations before. It was as if your whole family had been programmed with the same cycles, and no one ever escaped, but you were different. You reached that age, that season, that threshold where so many before you had fallen, and you stood. You stood in the storm. You stood under the pressure. You stood where the cycle expected you to collapse, whispering, "This time, they'll fall too." But you didn't. You chose to keep breathing. You chose to keep walking. You chose life instead of surrender. Psalm 118:17 declares, "I shall not die, but live, and declare the works of the Lord." These are not just ancient words. They are a living anthem written across your life. Where you should have been silenced, you found your voice. Where the grave of pain should have buried you, you rose and sang of life. Because you crossed that breaking point, the curse had nowhere left to go. It became like a broken bridge. Everything that comes after you can no longer cross. You cut off the flow. You let life become the new river, instead of letting darkness sweep everyone away. This is more than survival. It is living without distortion. Some make it through the darkness, but carry with them bitterness, addiction, hatred. They exist, but they do not truly live. They are shells haunted by the curse. But you passed through the darkness and refused to let it leave a mark. You did not allow bitterness to take root. You did not let the poison of hate seep in. You live, and you live fully. And that is what made the cycle fail. It needs unconscious agreement. It needs you to repeat the old scripts, but you didn't. You pulled the plug. You said no to the inheritance of shadows, and in that moment, the cycle had nowhere left to anchor itself. Chosen one, understand the true weight of what you've done. You didn't just win for yourself. You changed destiny for everyone after you. Your children will no longer carry an invisible weight they can't explain. Those who come next will walk lighter, freer, brighter, because you stood firm where the curse disappeared. Don't believe this path was easy. It was not. It demanded your tears. It demanded long nights. It demanded you face down temptations that wanted to consume you. But because you didn't back down, because you chose life, the darkness was stripped of its power. Picture a lamp passed down through generations. When it reached you, the flame was flickering, nearly out, but you kept it burning for one more moment. Long enough for the light to break the hold of darkness forever. Now, instead of passing on a fire of pain, you pass on a fire of light, and that change is eternal. Chosen one, you have outlived the curse's time limit, and because of that, the curse has died. There are stories that never get written down, yet everyone in the family knows them by heart. They are invisible scripts, where each person is assigned a role. One is burdened with responsibility for the whole family. One is labeled the weak one. One is always blamed for the chaos. And so, even without a word spoken, everyone plays their part, repeating the performance generation after generation. You too were given a role like that. A role of the villain, the scapegoat, the bearer of blame. They expected you to get angry, so they could say you were out of control. They wanted you to fail, so they could point and say you weren't worthy. They hoped you'd say the wrong thing, so they could use it as evidence to accuse you. The whole play only works if you agree to stand where they placed you. But one day, you stopped. You stopped reading the lines. You stopped following the choreography. You didn't scream when they wanted you to explode. You didn't cry when they expected you to collapse. You didn't react when they waited for your anger. You refused to play the role. And when you refused, the stage began to shake. Picture a play that has been performed over and over. The actors know their parts too well. The audience knows exactly what to expect. But suddenly, the lead actor steps out and says nothing. No lines, no familiar gestures. The entire theater falls into confusion. The other actors freeze. Everything falls apart because it all depended on one person's cooperation. That person is you. Chosen one, you didn't just step off the stage. You burned the script. You removed the costume. You walked out of the wings and out of the theater. You no longer belong to the performance, and without you, the play can't go on. This wasn't fake silence. This wasn't suppression to keep the peace. This was real inner transformation. They tried to provoke you, but you felt no need to react. They tried to accuse you, but you no longer felt the need to defend yourself. They waited for the old explosion, but all they found was your calm. The person they're facing now is not the version they used to manipulate. You've become someone new, a soul no longer under their control. At first, it disorients them, because they needed you to keep the story alive. They needed a reaction to continue the act. But when you no longer give it to them, the entire structure collapses. The dialogues they rehearsed in their heads fall flat. The old tricks echo into emptiness, and they are forced to confront a painful truth. They can no longer write your script. Chosen one, you didn't just free yourself. You dismantled a whole system that only survived through your cooperation. Because a toxic script only exists when someone agrees to play the part. When you refuse, the story dies. Imagine a wooden puppet. For generations, strings were pulled, and the puppet danced. But one day, the puppet lets go of the strings. It lifts its head, steps off the stage, and walks toward the light. The puppeteer stands frozen, because their power was never in the strings. It was in the puppet's willingness. And when that willingness ends, so does the power. You are that puppet who chose freedom. They may try to replace you to keep the story going, but your role no longer exists. You closed it forever. And because of that, the old story cannot be repeated. You may be called a traitor, a rebel, a disruptor of tradition. But remember, those accusations are only echoes from a dying script. The truth is, you betrayed no one. You remained loyal to your soul, loyal to the truth that you were never born to be an actor in someone else's play. Chosen one, refusing the role was the most powerful thing you've ever done. Because when you stepped off that stage, you stepped into a new story, one where you are the author. And this story will no longer revolve around blame, manipulation, or repetition. It will revolve around freedom, light, and truth. And when others look at you, they too will begin to realize they can do the same. They can reject the roles they never chose. They can walk away from the scripts that bound them. And so, one by one, these toxic plays will slowly fade into silence. Chosen one, you didn't just leave the stage. You became a flame that lights the way, showing others that no one has to accept a role that was never theirs. And that is true freedom. There is something few people realize. Cycles and patterns do not operate randomly. They have their own language, not the language of words or writing, but a secret language built from tone of voice, glances, attitudes, and repeated gestures. They are like invisible codes, programmed to unlock emotional doors inside you and make you respond exactly as the old script demands. You lived within that language for years without knowing it. A raised eyebrow could put you on the defensive. A half-hearted apology could pull you back into the same spiral. A hollow promise could make you believe one more time. You thought you were making choices, but in truth, you were responding to the language of the pattern. A language your soul unconsciously learned over generations. But then, something shifted. You began to see. You began to notice that not every word was innocent, not every action natural. You started to read the code behind them. You saw that a compliment wasn't always love, but a hook to keep you close. You saw that a criticism wasn't always truth, but a trap to make you defend yourself and stay stuck. You saw through the language, and the moment you understood it, you stepped out of the maze. Chosen one, you didn't just learn the language of the pattern. You chose to answer with silence. And that silence, not an argument, became your most powerful reply. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." This is not the stillness of weakness. This is the stillness of strength. The stillness that proves you are no longer controlled by the language of the cycle. Because you know, every time you react, you are agreeing to play again. Every time you justify yourself, you are fueling the script. Every time you explode, you are adding another page to the old story. But when you stay silent, you take the power away. You close the channel. You turn every provocation, every signal, into unreadable code, into a broken language. This silence is not pretense. It is not repression that boils underneath. It is true silence, because you are no longer being manipulated. What once touched your wounds now echoes like distant sounds. You hear it, but you no longer respond. And in that moment, the cycle collapses, because it no longer knows how to speak to you. Imagine a hacker trying to break into a system. They type in all the familiar passwords, the ones that always opened the door before. But now, the system has been changed. They type again and again, only to see the message. Wrong password. Access denied. That is what you've done. You've rewritten the password of your soul, and the old language no longer works. Chosen one. When you chose silence, you declared something far greater. I'm not playing this game anymore. I don't belong to this language anymore. I've tuned into a different frequency, and that declaration shakes the soul's foundations, breaking the chains that once held you. Some people around you won't understand. They're used to your explosions, to dramatic arguments, to never-ending fights. When you go quiet, they feel lost. They push harder, try louder provocations. But still, you stay silent. They may think you've grown weaker, but the truth is, you've never been stronger. Because now, you are no longer defined by that language. You've chosen a new language, the language of peace, of light, of truth. Chosen one. Do you know how powerful your silence really is? It's like a symphony that suddenly stops at its peak, revealing a silence that everyone hears. That pause confuses the enemy, because they don't know how to continue. And in that space, you find freedom. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer need to explain just to be accepted. You no longer need to fight to hold your place. Because you now know your worth does not come from the language of the cycle. It comes from the deep truth that you are a child of light. Loved, chosen, and protected. Chosen one. You've learned the language of the pattern, and you chose silence as your reply. And in that silence, you shattered a conversation that lasted for generations. You turned old codes into meaningless symbols. You locked the door to a script no one can drag you back into. That is your victory. Not loud, not explosive, just silence. But a silence strong enough to bring down the entire system. There are patterns that have no life of their own. They are like parasites, surviving only on the energy you unknowingly feed them. They feast on your fear. They feed off your anger. They drink your insecurity, your hunger for validation, your longing to be understood. They exist because you supply them. And as long as you keep reacting, they stay alive. Chosen one, you once fed those parasites. Every time you argued to defend yourself, they grew stronger. Every time you cried alone, they drank your tears. Every sleepless night of anxiety made them swell. They made you believe you had to react, to speak, to fight back. But the truth is, the more energy you gave, the weaker you became, and the stronger they grew. Then one day, you discovered the secret. You don't have to defeat them in a loud battle. You just have to stop feeding them. And when you stop feeding them, they die. No trumpets, no bloodshed, just a quiet fading away. Imagine a vine clinging tightly to a wall, thriving off its nutrients. But one day, the gardener cuts the root. For a while, the vine still looks green, as if nothing changed. But slowly, leaf by leaf, branch by branch, it withers. And one morning, the wall stands bare again. The parasite didn't die because you attacked it. It died because you refused to nourish it. That's what you've done with old patterns. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never wanted to understand. You stopped getting angry at provocations meant only to stir chaos. You stopped trembling at threats that had no real power. You chose to keep your energy for life, for peace, for light. And from that choice, the old patterns began to disappear. Others may not notice right away. They'll still try the same tricks. They'll wait for the same reactions. But when you no longer give them your energy, all they find is emptiness. They try to provoke, but nothing happens. They want your explanation, but you respond with a silent smile. They want you to panic, but you stand firm. And so, day by day, the old system withers. This is the power of choice. You reclaimed authority over your energy. You now know you don't have to keep funding a dark economy. You no longer trade your peace for cheap validation. You no longer let fear steer your decisions. Chosen one, this shift is not small. It is foundational. It is a sacred protection you've built for yourself. This is prophetic number 444, the mark of stability, of fortified walls, of divine protection from above. When you stop feeding the darkness, you raise a 444 wall around you, a foundation no parasite can cling to. If this number stirs something in you, if you sense you are entering this protected space, leave a comment with 444. It is more than a number, it is a declaration. that you've chosen a new foundation, that you are living under divine protection. Chosen one, from now on, your energy is no longer food for darkness. It is the light that guides your steps. It is the lamp that lights the way for the next generation. And when you manage your energy, you become the one in power. No longer prey, no longer a source. You have become the master. Don't think this is a small thing. It is one of the greatest victories. Because parasites never announce their death. They simply disappear. And one day, you'll look back and realize, the thing that once terrified you now holds no power. What once drained you is nothing but a shadow. You turn around, and there's nothing there. Chosen one, you have reclaimed your energy. You have starved the parasite, and from this moment forward, it will never live again. This is freedom. There are enemies who persist in firing arrows at the same old place. They believe you're still there, still in the same house, still in the same state, still the same person. They aim straight at your familiar fears, your old wounds, your patterns of weakness. But all they find is emptiness, because you've moved on. You no longer live at the old address. Chosen one, you've changed the coordinates of your soul. Not just your behavior, but your entire being has shifted. You've left the old roads, the crossroads you once knew too well. In the realm of the spirit, you no longer dwell at the intersection of fear and doubt. You now reside on the avenue of peace and purpose. Picture a letter delivered to your former home. The mail carrier confidently drops it into the box, but the house has long been torn down. No windows, no roof, no one there to receive it. The letter lies there, meaningless. Every arrow aimed at you is the same. They were sent to a version of you that no longer exists. That version is gone. This isn't just an internal shift. It's a shift in time, because cycles don't just operate through emotion. They operate through rhythm. Have you noticed? Certain seasons of the year always seem to pull you back into the same pain. Certain anniversaries always awaken old sorrow. Certain stages of life seem to replay the same mistakes from generations past. That is the time loop. The familiar cycle's darkness uses to schedule your downfall. But you've stepped off that clock. You no longer move to the rhythm of the old cycle. You've chosen a different tempo, the rhythm of God. And once you enter His time, the enemy loses track. They set traps for this month, this year, this occasion, but you never show. They expect you to stumble on this date, at this hour, but you're no longer there. All their plans fall apart. Chosen one, you didn't just change your address. You changed the time zone of your soul. You are no longer bound to the harvest season of failure, the cycle of loss. You've stepped into a new season, where time doesn't repeat, it progresses. Imagine a dancer who knows every beat of the old song. They know exactly when the drums will drop, when to spin, when to step. But suddenly, the music changes. A new melody begins. The old dancer stumbles, unsure how to move anymore. That is what the cycle feels when you change the song. It loses balance because it no longer controls your rhythm. Chosen one, when you shift your coordinates, when you leave the old clock behind, you become invisible to the old strategies. They may look for you, but all they see is space. They may draw their bow, but the arrow lands in thin air because you're now on higher ground, in a different space, in a different time. Do you know what the most miraculous part is? When you enter God's time, you're no longer living by your own rhythm. You live by the rhythm of divine protection. Your steps become unpredictable because they no longer come from fear or memory. They come from the direction of your Creator. And when He becomes your clock, no one can predict your movement. Chosen one, this is elevation, not just escape, transcendence. You've stepped out of the toxic timeline and into a new cycle of life, where each day is no longer a repetition, but a creation. Pay attention. You've already felt this shift inside. In the past, certain seasons weighed heavily on you. Certain dates triggered old emotions. But now, those same seasons pass like any other. No more pull, no more pressure. That's proof that you've left the old clock behind. Chosen one, remember this. The enemy still thinks you're there, but the truth is, you've gone far. You've changed your soul's address, your frequency, your rhythm. You've stepped out of the old calendar and now live by God's calendar. And on that calendar, there are no days of failure, no hours of defeat, no seasons of despair. Only the seasons of light, of freedom, of life. You have changed your coordinates. You have stepped out of the time loop. And from this moment forward, you are free. There are moments on the journey when you realize that your victory is not just your own. It's not only about breaking the cycle, not only about finding peace. It becomes a testimony, a living proof that chains can be broken, that what once seemed like destiny was only an illusion. And you, chosen one, are that proof. Others look at you, and they see the undeniable change. They remember the old version of you, quick to react, easily hurt, easily drawn back in. But now, they see someone new, calm, clear, free. Your presence has become an indictment against darkness, because your freedom proves that the cycle was never God's design, and the curse was never unbreakable. As Psalm 37:4 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." Your joy no longer comes from temporary things, or from trying to please others. It comes from connection with the one who called you out of the dark. And when that joy becomes your foundation, your desires are no longer distorted by fear or the need to prove yourself. They are refined, elevated, and fulfilled as a promise. Chosen one, you haven't just been set free. You've become a sign for your community, for your generation. Every step you take declares that freedom is not a distant dream. It is real. It is for anyone bold enough to say, "Enough," to the old script. And this is where the number 777 appears, the prophetic sign of wholeness, of soul awakening, of divine mystery. This number isn't random. It arrives when you've walked through the fire of breaking, healing, and renewal. It is heaven's confirmation that you have entered a completely new cycle, no longer bound, no longer looking back, only expanding in the light. If you feel you are stepping into that level of awakening, leave the number 777 inches the comments. It's more than a number. It's a unified declaration that you are ready for soul completion. Chosen one, your freedom is not just about avoiding old traps. It's becoming contagious, inspiring, and illuminating the way for others. Every time you smile without the weight you used to carry, someone sees hope. Every time you stay calm in the face of provocation, someone realizes they can choose that path too. Every time you live in truth, you open a door for souls longing to be true to themselves. This is the power of a living testimony. You don't need many words. You don't have to convince anyone. Your existence, your freedom, is already the loudest message. And that message says, no chain is permanent, no cycle is unbreakable, no curse is stronger than grace. Chosen one, understand this. Your life has become a new song. No longer the chorus of pain, no longer the rhythm of fear, now only the melody of freedom, echoing into the air, inviting those listening to join in. You may not fully see the impact you're making. You may think your freedom is small, but know this, even the smallest light can drive away the dark, and your freedom is a flame, spreading warmth and light to hearts that once felt cold and dim. Chosen one, this is not the end. This is the beginning. Your journey has rewritten the story, not just for you, but for those who will come after. You have redirected the current, you have reestablished freedom, and now you walk into a new era, where peace is your foundation, joy is your language, and light is your breath. Walk forward with the confidence that you are protected, chosen, and guided. Walk knowing that 777 has marked you with a seal of awakening. Walk with gratitude, because you are not only saved from the dark, you are called to be the light. Chosen one, this is the blessing spoken over you now. May light surround you. May joy become your rhythm. May your freedom spread so that anyone who touches it is also ignited. And if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment, a number, a testimony, or simply an amen to confirm that you have chosen the light. May your journey ahead be filled with courage. May peace wrap around you like an unshakable embrace. And may the light within you become the flame that leads others home. This is not the end. This is the beginning of a new life. Walk forward and walk in freedom. Grateful that you chose to spend these moments in the light of this story. If it touched your soul, please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell so the next whisper of light may find its way back to you.